Hi, everybody. This is Neat Ganan from B Coaching Solutions. As most of you are aware, this is a podcast on burnout. I've done a little bit around burnout over the last couple of weeks, and it's really seemed to resonate with people. So I thought I would do a series over the next 6 weeks where I invite some very special guests to talk about burnout, either from a very personal perspective or practical professional perspective. They've all been involved in burnout in one way, shape, or form. So it's very actionable and practical steps that you can take if you find yourself in the middle of it, or if you notice that some of the symptoms are showing up for you. And the best part of all of this is you might even be able to prevent it if you put some of these steps in place. So I'm absolutely delighted to invite and have on board a very amazing human, Fiona Byrne, who has her own business called Life on a Roll. And Fiona is a psychotherapist and a coach and has a very personal story when it comes to burnout. So Fiona, I'm so happy you were able to join me today. How are you?
I'm great, Neve, and thank you for inviting me on this podcast. I was only too delighted to reciprocate your invite, so thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I might get you to share a little bit about your own personal story. I know when we first met, you shared it with me, and I was in awe at your ability to have worked through it and your resilience around it and how you show up every single day. So, if you want to share as much or as little, that would be really helpful so that people can start to understand that you will absolutely see your way through the other side of some of this stuff.
Yeah, thank you. So, I suppose really for me, like many things, it can be a gradual thing that just gathers pace. And I suppose for me, I worked in corporate for probably the guts of 20 years in the communications business. And in many ways, it was an industry that was ill-fitting for me.
Okay.
I had so many great years there. I worked with many great people who are now my friends to this day. But if I'm honest and truthful, I felt like I was walking to work in a pair of ill-fitting shoes pretty much. Certainly not, if not every day, but a very frequent feeling for me. And
Okay.
so I think really a lot of that need for me was, and obviously I was in this for the guts of 20 years. That's a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And one thing I suppose that now that I speak and say it to you is, a lot of the time when we get caught up in that cycle, we kind of feel there isn't a way out. And I remember many times sort of asking myself, how can I break this? How can I get out of this? And eventually through a series of various different things, in terms of chipping away at possibility or chipping away at ways to improve my life and also remove myself from what I felt was not fundamentally working for me. It
I find,
involved me.
Fiona, people mightn't even realize they're in the middle of it. I think that's what I found. It took me 2 years to realize when I was at the other side of it that that's what it was. People might not even recognize it. That's what
And I
I
don't
find.
think I did at the time. I actually don't
Okay.
think I did at the time. It was just a way of being. And it's when I look back now, I realize actually it was like I was driving my car in fifth gear all the time,
Mm,
and not knowing how to change gears or not actually thinking I could. That's the
okay.
piece. Not actually
Interesting.
thinking I could. And so, I think for me, even, and my journey into counseling and psychotherapy, it took many years of doing volunteering work
Okay.
aside of my corporate work, trying to find purpose and meaning. I think it was really at the root of that for me. And so retraining in counseling and psychotherapy, for me, it was very much about actually bringing it back to the relationship to myself. And I think
Okay.
a lot of this, and when it comes to burnout, it's again that piece of, well, what is my relationship to myself? What am I taking on too much? Have I an ability to say no? If I do say no, how do I feel about saying no? Can I delegate? Or do I have control issues that I think I'm the only one who can do something or do it the way it needs to be done? So it's like lots of these things. I think when I look back now, I think there was certainly perfectionist tendencies in me and just driving myself too hard.
Yeah.
And one thing, you know, when I look back, I think they're the pieces of, you know, learning to listen to the signs, learning to listen to your body,
Mm.
and learning to pay attention to the gentle nudges that when we don't pay attention to may actually become more hard hitting than we'd ever want them to.
Yeah.
And so for me, how that presented was tinnitus. So you know, relentless noise inside my head. And that
Okay.
actually really impacted on my hearing. So I have tinnitus related hearing loss. So that was a massive journey over certainly the last 14, 15 years for me, which
Okay.
involved a lot of changing lifestyle, changing how I speak to myself, learning, I suppose, to have better boundaries around taking on too much, the tendency to take on too much, even now.
Like so
And
many.
yeah, and to just really catch myself in the awareness of that.
Mm. So just
And
to be really clear then, Fiona, so you were in the corporate world, you found yourself, you know, that perfectionist tendencies, your body was trying to tell you something the entire time, like, you know, in your ear, for want of a better term, and you ended up getting tinnitus and you've had hearing loss as a direct result. So would you say that was the burnout kind of creeping up on you and just kind of culminated in this? Is that what you're saying here?
yeah,
Okay,
absolutely. And that was
wow.
it. So, you know, and it's not gone. I've pivoted, I've changed career, etc. But I think it's like that again. You learn to live with it and manage it
Okay.
and work through it. And that's really, you know, that's I'm living with this now. So
Mm.
it's a big lesson to learn. It's a very big lesson to learn. And so part of me, and I mean this in the nicest way, Neve, is that, you know, I on my better days, I look at it and I think, well, I've actually co-created this.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, I have co-created this, and to really try, and the work I do now is very much around trying to work with the wisdom of the body, and also really learn to pay attention to the cues of when I know I'm pushing it too much,
Okay.
you know, all of those things. And that's individual to everyone, but I think it's that piece of it comes back to paying attention to the signs, and really don't ignore what might come up, however it comes up for us, whether it could be irritation, frustration, where it could be emotions, could be
Yeah.
overwhelm, it could be anything. For me, it's, you know, a pitch will raise, my ringing in my ear will change and fluctuate, and so or I'll get
Okay.
dizzy and I'll know when I'm pushing it. There's like a feeling that comes over my body, and I know
Mm.
that feeling. It's just that familiar, uh-oh, I know what I'm doing here. So
You can
it's
sense
those
it coming on at
pieces.
this stage.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's very much, I think, to sometimes we don't have to look outside of ourselves for the,
Very
you
rarely.
know,
The answers are always within us, right?
yeah, yeah, it's exactly that. It's like that almost like stone in your shoe, you know. It's like, oh God, there it is again. I can't ignore it. I
Yeah.
can't ignore it. So yeah, so I think especially now as well, you know, where the lines can be blurred between home and work, you
Mm.
know, I think, you know, we hear about work from home, and I actually think it's more about being attentive to work with home.
Mm.
Okay, in that our homes have become our workplaces and our workplaces have become our homes for now. So small things, even myself, I need to make sure that I put away the laptop every evening, clear the desk that I've been working at, so that I can actually create space for something else, you know.
Mm.
A lot of the time I work at my kitchen table, which is very common with a lot of my clients. They would say that that's where they work, or some of them work from their bedrooms. And it's that piece of, you know, if you're sharing with a flatmate, it's like, well, how do we all have some place to work and be able to concentrate? So everyone's situation is different, and I think
Yeah.
it's really important to look at your own situation and go, okay, what one thing can I do that will actually help me take more of a sense of, I suppose, control of my space. And that
Mm.
might be making sure that the laptop is put away every night, that I change. I sit in a different place to where I have my dinner. I sit at the other side of the table or something like that. I think there's small ways in restriction of time, of space that we're in, that we can actually help ourselves minimize what seems like, a full-on way to live at the moment, with blurred lines between work and home.
Those kind of like those conscious actions that help you to feel like you're ending one part of your day and entering another. And so if that is clearing your kitchen table, move away the work stuff and set the table. Who sets the table anymore, really, right? Or if you're in your bedroom, create a different energy in the space. I don't know, light a candle or whatever it is that works for you. And I think I was telling you a little bit earlier when we were chatting that I had a client who categorically was with me to help find work-life balance. And so we were working through it, because like that, the lines had become completely blurred and he was just working every hour God sends. And what he chose to do, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant, and he found it incredible, was he would use the time he would typically have used as the commute, so 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the evening, and he would go for a walk during that time. So he'd go for a walk in the morning. When he came back, it was time to start work. And of an evening, he'd shut his laptop and he'd go for a walk. And when he came back, he was finished work, end of. He'd move it out of his sight. He'd put the stuff away so it wasn't like, creeping up on him. And he would leave it there for the evening. And that seemed to really work for him. And I love those kind of practical things that people are doing to find their way through it, because I think a lot of people are saying the lines are blurred. And that's where a lot of burnout's coming, because it's just one constant day of work for a lot of people now.
And that's the piece. And I also think, a little bit like that Shakespearean quote, know thyself. For me, Niamh, I know if I don't get out first thing in the morning, I will not get the walk in. I will tell myself I'll do it at lunchtime. And I will tell myself if I don't do it at lunchtime, I'll do it at 4:30 when I finish, or whatever, 5:30.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't. So I have come to learn, okay, Fiona, that if you don't get it done first thing in the morning, it's not going to happen. Yeah. Another small thing for me is that, I've really enjoyed getting up to watch the sunrise.
Okay.
That has been a huge grounding, leveling for me. And if you can't get by the sea, you can stand in your living room or your back garden and watch the sunrise, wherever perspective you can get that. But it's that piece of like, it's just, again, how am I setting my day up?
Yeah.
And even if I know it's going to be busy and there's going to be stuff pulling at me, but there is precious time, I think before we start work, and to remember to give that to ourselves. Nobody can work from an empty tank, nobody can give from an empty cup. And it's those kind of things that if you know that you're more of a morning person, then you're giving that as a high five to yourself. You're going to get out of bed early. And even if it's 2 days a week or 3 mornings a week, you decide. I think we need to realize we have a lot more ability to impact our days than we give it credit for. Yeah. It's the same thing of like, scrolling on social media. If I have an hour to do that, but I don't have an hour to go for a walk, well, then how am I choosing to spend my time? And again, this is no like judgment of ourselves or anything. It's more like curiosity. Oh, why would I not give myself something that I know will actually help me? Will help calibrate my system, will help my nervous system feel more beneficial if I go for the walk, or if I take my cup of tea out to the garden or my balcony or whatever my living circumstances are. So I think it's that piece of.
So it is a really constant, conscious decision, isn't it? Because you can choose to scroll, you can choose to just sit and watch TV, and there's no judgment in that if that's what works. But I think if you want something different, you have to do something different, or else nothing changes. So it's really about finding what works for you and, implement that and help it to become a habit.
And that's the piece.
Yeah.
Because I have found for me, the sunrise thing is a real grounding force. And
Mm.
when my alarm goes up, and it's now getting earlier, obviously I was getting away with it in the winter time an extra while, but now the sunrise is earlier. But I go to the benefit. I actually think of the benefit for me of seeing a beautiful sunrise that just sets me up. And so that gets me out of the bed. So I think it's like anything in life, Niamh, you find the combination that works for you. You find whatever it is, that thing that works for you, and to remember to take in the benefit, not to just do it, but to actually take in that actually feels good.
And notice where
better
in the body, notice where in the body it helps you to feel better. It's really noticing it. I think that's really the key, and certainly something that we've mentioned numerous times, and that'll come up a lot more when we talk about the neuroscience, etc., behind it in a later podcast. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things I was reading was around the definition of burnout. So just to help people to, you know, determine what it might look like. And it's really a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion, usually brought on by a prolonged state of stress, excessive stress. And it occurs when you're feeling overwhelmed and when you really struggle with just some of the day-to-day tasks that you would never have had a problem with before. And I think you mentioned it a little bit, Fiona, around some of the symptoms that might show up, you know, lack of energy, lack of interest and motivation, kind of a disassociation between your colleagues or people in your life. You know, there's numerous interest or information that your body is feeding you. And ideally what you want to do, if you're noticing things just feel off and you're feeling discontent and just a little bit, you know, overly cynical about things, it's stopping and asking yourself, what's happening here? Because if you keep going, that's where things can become excessive, and that's where you can really start to have some of the medical challenges, you know, as Fiona described. Her hearing has been impaired, and that's quite an extreme version, Fiona, I would say. But, you know, as you say, you didn't listen to your body the entire time, and it culminated in this kind of medical condition. So I think what I would say is, you know, really encourage people, if there is real physical symptoms showing up and you think you might need to go to your GP, go sooner rather than later. It's better to check in. But if you are just kind of starting to feel some of this at this stage, then using some of the information here as practical steps that you can put in place that's going to help you is really going to make a difference. But knowing that what you got into this state is not going to get you out, so you are going to have to do something different. What do you think, Fiona? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And you are going to have to change it. Sometimes, Niamh, that involves facing hard truths about ourselves. And as you were speaking there, you know, there's an acronym that I find really helpful, and it's called STOP. So it's literally, S is for stop, T is for take a step back, metaphorically and physically speaking, from what's in front of me, i.e. too many emails, too many things on my to-do list, too much going on. Observe, okay, what's actually happening here and what's happening in my body. And P is present a new alternative.
STOP,
okay,
I love it.
Yeah, STOP. So I think that is really stop. Stop, take a step back, observe, and present a new alternative. And that new alternative could be something as simply as saying, let me get back to you. Rather than I have to add this, let me get back to you, or managing boundaries. You know, I'm not able to look at that right now. It'll be tomorrow before I can do that. Most of the time when we ask for what we need, people will actually, okay, that's fine. So I think there are the pieces. It's a little bit like, well, how am I co-creating? Am I able to ask for what I need? Am I adding all this, you know, extra layers onto my plate? When in actual fact, if I spoke up and said, I can do that, but I can't do that for you within the timeline. You know, I can do it at this time. A lot of the time people are like, oh, okay, that's fine. I don't need it till tomorrow anyway. You know, so I think they're the pieces of getting better at the boundaries, you know, getting better at the boundaries. And I think the STOP acronym is a really helpful way of like, okay,
I love that.
Yeah, is my tendency to say yes and jump in rather than actually no, let me look at what else is on the to-do list here. And if I was to ask for that to be pushed out, would that be the end of the world?
Yeah.
Maybe
and
not.
Of course, it's often the stories we're telling ourselves. Fiona, I know you and I had a conversation about this a little bit earlier as well, is we couldn't possibly think about pushing back, or we couldn't possibly think about not reacting at that moment in time. Or when the doctor said to you, Fiona, I'm going to sign you off for 2 weeks, you couldn't possibly imagine that you could possibly take 2 weeks off work. That just sounded like outrageous. But it had to
And
happen because your health was in jeopardy. So maybe talk to that a little bit.
And that's right. And I think that's the piece, everything, everything is figure outable. That's a quote from
Yeah.
Marie Forleo. And I love that. And it really, I still say that to myself and talk myself in off the ledge. I think, you're always working on this kind of stuff. It's
Yeah,
really
for sure.
important to do that. And I think to remember that, everyone we're all dispensable. And it's really important that even though there is only we are unique beings, there is only one of us, but to really acknowledge that and remember that and realize that I need to actually mind that. I need to mind myself. And by another one that I love is Brene Brown. She talks, am I giving a dirty yes or a healthy no?
Ooh.
And again, that's really lovely. If I'm saying yes, knowing that I'm taking more on, would a healthy no be better for me and the person I'm working with?
Oh, I love that. I used to work with a lady called Pat Waters, and she used to use the phrase, the cost of yes. And I've carried that with me for years. I love that. What's the cost of yes?
I think it's exactly that, Niamh. And I think when this comes back to the sort of theme that we're sort of leaning into here, the co-creation and the burnout, it's like the cost of the yes. Is it a dirty yes or a healthy no? Stop. What would it be like if I said, let me get back to you? It's small little things that actually, when we get the evidence of the world hasn't fallen apart when we've done these things, it's actually very encouraging. And really, and I think, when that happens and you realize, oh my God, saying no or asking for more time actually didn't have a negative impact. It was the project still was done on time, or the deadline was still met, but I actually cared for myself along the way.
Yeah,
that is really important.
Oh my God, 100%. And you really have to ask yourself, what job is so important that I would risk my health for? Like, really and truly, how many of us can say my job is so important that it's worth risking my health for? Not many people can. But again, the story we tell ourselves is it feels like it's so important I couldn't possibly, miss a day or take time to recuperate, because that's what we're trying to say here with practical and actionable steps for burnout is if you take the time and invest in yourself and help you see yourself over the other side by taking some of these steps, you will absolutely recover and you can start back up and be the brilliant version of yourself before, without the burnout stuff chasing you. And I think that's what this is all about, is getting back to your natural self. I love what your website says, Fiona, in terms of, is it coming back to your natural self or something like that?
Yeah, you naturally at your best.
Yeah.
Finding that you is what I do.
It.
And I love that. I really want to just loop back in on what you said there, Niamh, about, the work piece. And there's a book that I think I'd mentioned to you that was written by an Australian woman. She was a nurse, and she basically helped people at the end of their life. Her name is Bronnie Ware, W-A-R-E, Bronnie Ware. And she wrote a book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying. And two of the key points that I took from that was, 2 of the 5 regrets that really stood out for me was, I wish I hadn't worked so hard, and I wish I had let myself be happier. These were 2 of the 5 regrets of those that she observed moving on from that chapter of their life. And so, she wrote this powerful book, and it's just been a massive success worldwide, because these are like really important life questions. And I think, the time like COVID that we're living in, even the fact that burnout will have such a positive response when it's actually the topic is mentioned, people are beginning to reassess, hold on a second, what is important for me here? And even when I'm working with clients, we talk about this COVID time, two things, and I also do this for myself. What am I willing to let go of?
Oh, that's a
What is
biggie.
this time? What is this year long plus, restricted life, a new way of working? What am I learning? So what am I willing to what am I wanting to let go of? And
A tough one
what
sometimes.
would, and what would I like more of?
Oh,
So
okay.
what am I letting go of, and what would I like more of?
Mm.
So that kind of piece, am I wanting to let go of always just automatically saying yes? And would I like more of space to say, let me get back to you? And there could be some two small things that are interconnected.
Tiny.
But
Love
watching
that.
the impact of what's the impact when I say those things.
Mm.
So I think, it's just really interesting time that we are living in to ask ourselves these questions in a different way to what we possibly would have 12 months ago.
For sure. Oh my goodness, for sure. Particularly through all the different lockdowns, etc. So unfortunately, we're out of time, Fiona. But if you were to sum up, say, two very practical, very actionable steps out of all of the amazing wisdom you've shared, what would they be?
Okay, so I think I suppose the first one would be know thyself. Okay, which is, we're all living in our bodies. We know when we're pushing ourselves. So pay attention to that. And I think the second one then is the acronym STOP, because that's actually taking something with the nudge that the body might give, which is know thyself, and to stop, take a step back, observe, and present a new solution to the same problem. So I think they're kind of interrelated, and I hope that they help your listeners, Niamh, and that they're small pieces of advice or small steps that actually followed through consistently and committedly. It could be a month later and you might realize, actually, I'm not, I all of a sudden don't feel so stressed, because
I feel a bit better.
What have I been doing? And have I been doing it? Consistency is everything in this.
Oh my God, totally. Neuroscience again, absolutely. To be able to create that sustainable habit, consistency, it's like building a muscle. You have to keep doing it over and over and over. Just going to the gym once doesn't get you fit and healthy. You have to keep going back. And it's the same with this stuff, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're never finished with this. It's not like you've nailed burnout. It's like, especially with myself, I know if I have a tendency to be a certain way, I have to catch that and watch it.
Yeah.
So it's, again, know myself and use stop.
Yeah.
They're the key
you
things.
Start to recognize it quicker. I think once if you've been through it and you've recognized it and you've come out the other side, you do start to notice it quicker. Hopefully it won't happen again, but if it does, you start to notice it quicker, which is brilliant, and you can implement some of these actionable steps from there. So we might just leave it there, Fiona, just to say to anybody who's listening, there will be 5 more guests sharing absolute brilliant words of wisdom coming from a completely different angle each time. There'll be a lot of similarities and there will be actionable steps each time. And I think the key is for you to pick 1 or 2 that you want to prioritize. Again, there's no point in being overwhelmed by all the things you're trying to do to overcome burnout. It's pick 1 or 2 very simple steps for you that's going to make the world a difference. So Fiona, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always, my friends. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Niamh. Thank